How's it going, everybody? This is Ron Sparkman, and I'm the Chief Curiosity Correspondent for the Space Foundation Discovery Center. And today we're going to have the very final episode of Space4U Live before I begin a new web event series that'll be coming next week with some of the students and the people that run the higher end of SEDS. So everybody look forward to that and check out our social media for more details. And we also want to remind you that we announced the launch of our Center for Innovation and Education. And the Center for Innovation and Education creates and delivers inclusive, innovative, and sustainable workforce development and economic opportunity programs that enable all people to actively participate in the space economy. Through public and private partnerships, the center engages students, young leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals. We encourage you to learn more about the new Center for Innovation and Education and how you can make an impact at www.spacefoundation.com/CINE. And also one more quick reminder that we have reopened the Discovery Center to the general public. So come see us today off Garden on the Gods Road, and do remember that face coverings are required. So we have an extra special guest today that is joining us. We have the CEO of Astrobotic, John Thornton, and we're going to talk about all the amazing things that they're up to with the Artemis program and getting people, rovers, everything back to the moon. So thank you so much for joining us today, John. We're glad to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And so one thing I always like to ask everybody right out of the gate is, what inspired you to fall in love with space and science?
So for me, it was when I was in middle school. I remember I think it was my 5th grade teacher had some kind of project to go off and build something. And the thing that inspired me right around that time was when the first rover landed on Mars. It was the Mars Pathfinder mission with the small rover that's the size of a bread box. So it was really, really inspiring for me. And I remember my teacher asking me to build something, so I built a Lego model of that. And I think that's where the seed got planted for me for space. And it's grown over the years. And then, of course, Astrobotic just hit just perfect at the right time for me. And the rest is history.
And so what is your background? So you fell in love with it and you started getting into it. Is it engineering? Is it astronomy? What was the first thing you got into, and how did it lead you to being the CEO of Astrobotic?
Yeah, actually, so that seed that was planted in middle school, it was growing and I didn't know it. So then I went through high school and I went to school at CMU in mechanical engineering. So I wanted to go build stuff and do mechanical things out in the world. And then I got an offer from a big aerospace company out on the West Coast, so I was going to go do that. But then this thing called Google Lunar X Prize was announced, and there was an opportunity to fly and land on the surface of the moon to win a prize for Google Lunar X Prize. And that sounded really, really cool. So at the time, we started up the company Astrobotic to go after it. Originally, it was all about chasing that prize. And then over the years, found out lots of challenges and almost went under a few times. And then about 7 to 8 years ago is when I took over the company to try to push us towards the idea of creating a lunar delivery service, i.e. selling payloads to go to the surface of the moon. We sold the first commercial payloads to go to the surface of the moon for the very first time. And then from there, we were able to build up a manifest, show the world that we were ready for it. And then Eclipse opportunity came out with NASA. And we were lucky enough to be selected for one of the first opportunities in last year for Task Order 2, as they call it. We got an $80 million contract to fly their payloads to the surface of the moon. And then just a few weeks ago, we got our second big mission, and this is even bigger, a $200 million opportunity to take a 475 kilogram rover that NASA is developing to the pole of the moon.
And so before we go any further, I have a very important question. What exactly is behind you?
Yeah, so right behind me here, this is the mock-up for the Peregrine Lander. This is the lander that will fly to the surface of the moon late next year, but this is just the marketing mock-up. The structural test model was just completed and tested. Things look really good on that so far. So things are on track for next year's flight. But this is our delivery vehicle. This is where the payloads attach. We fly this vehicle out to the surface of the moon. We have power on board and communication capability on board for payloads to communicate back home. So we become the local utility and power station for payloads.
And you obviously have a lot going on, in particular for the moon. Everybody's excited about it. But one thing I want to talk a little bit about is I love that the way that the website is set up, to where people can go and look at what it can be to take a mission to the moon. To space, and I've not seen anything else like it, and I love that setup. So kind of what went behind that, because it's really amazing to say, okay, I want to send something to the moon, what's this going to run me? And you can do the whole breakdown, and it's very easy, very intuitive, and I know it made me kind of look at it, and honestly relatively affordable. I'm like, All right, base is only 1.5 million. I could probably pull that out in a decade.
Well, yeah, thank you for the compliments on the website. We're really excited about that, and it's that we created that many years ago, and the whole idea there was to make it more accessible and make it easier for the customers to access space, and in particular the moon. And that's our goal as a company. So the way we approached the website was we said, okay, how can we break down our sales offering to its barest essentials, make it super simple for the customer to log online, check it out, get an idea of what it actually costs to fly these kinds of missions, and essentially simmer down the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of variables down to just one, which is just mass, and sell it by the kilogram. So we sell payload to the surface of the moon at 1.2 million per kilogram, and the website is all about making that really, really easy. A parallel to that is thinking about booking an airline flight. You've got all the intricacies of everything that goes on behind the scenes to make an airplane fly, and maintenance, and to the crew and everything else. But you just go online and you buy one ticket, and it's that same idea for the lunar delivery side. Is, hey, let's try to simplify this all the way down to make it as accessible as possible for our customers.
And so Max got a great question here. He wants to know, it was announced that you were going to launch on Rocket Lab's Electron. Is that still on the books?
So they must be referencing someone else's launch. So we're not planning on flying on Rocket Lab. Our first mission is going to be flown on a ULA Vulcan launch vehicle. So that's the upgraded Atlas V launch vehicle, and that's going to fly next year on our Peregrine Lander with our Peregrine Lander. And then we have not yet selected our launch for the Griffin mission. This is the 475 kilogram, $200 million mission. We're talking to launch providers, and we'll be updating on that later this year.
All right, so Mac's normally pretty good about his information, so I wonder what he got confused with that. He's always pretty on that one. So let's talk a little bit about it. You all have the lander for Griffin, and it's going to take Viper, the water hunting mission to the moon. What exactly does that mean really for the Artemis program? Why is this such an important piece of it?
Well, so first off is just the commercial delivery to the surface of the moon is a really big deal for NASA and the whole world, in that it makes the moon accessible, affordable, and possible for many, many organizations that have otherwise just not been able to access it. Our first mission, for example, will double, if not maybe triple, the number of nations that have ever operated payloads on the surface of the moon. And that's possible because our price point is so low, and the lander is very accessible for the customers and the payloads that come with us. So that's a really, really big thing for NASA and the rest of the world. Because it means that we'll have regular, affordable access to the surface of the moon. And then the missions themselves and the payloads that NASA is sending also are really, really big deals for the development of space and the moon, and access to the rest of the solar system, in that one of the big pushes and emphasis on that is to find resources. And in particular, the resources at the pole of the moon, namely water. Because if you can get water on the surface of the moon, you can drink it, obviously, you can split it, so you can breathe it because there's oxygen in there, and you can also split it into oxygen and hydrogen, and then you've made rocket fuel. So potentially the water at the pole of the moon could be a fantastic resource for storing energy and creating rocket fuel, such that the moon could become a refueling station, or we could go back and forth from orbit down to the surface of the moon and know that we have resources on the surface. And it would also be the first time that we've used resources from another planetary body for our own uses. If we can begin to do that as a species, and i.e. remove the tether of reliance on Earth for our resources when we go to space, that's massive. That will open up our solar system. That means we can actually go to the moon and Mars and other destinations and know that we have the technology, the capability to live off the land to some degree. And that makes us true explorers. That means we can go and explore and go find new things. And also, I think the really important thing there is that we can then take that same technology and use the same things that we learned about that back here on Earth to survive in some of the most harsh environments here on Earth, and to make life better.
And so not only are you producing this lander, you're also going to do an autonomous moon rover called Moon Ranger. So can you tell us a little bit about that? I know that goes back a little bit further, but that's exciting. By the way, great name, Moon Ranger. Just cannot buy one.
Yeah. So the Moon Ranger project is a partnership with Carnegie Mellon, and that is to build the first autonomous rover on pole, to demonstrate the first autonomous rover at the poles of the moon. And the reason that is so important on the moon is that there are times that you have communication back to Earth, and there's times that you don't. So that means that you have to be able to navigate and do your mission without control from Earth. There's other times where it's potentially you're on the far side of the moon and you don't have a relay satellite, or you're behind a large mountain, for example, and you need to get to the other side to connect back home to Earth. So it's a really, really important capability for just exploration, but also if we're ever going to get to the place where we're extracting resources and fuel, which will be almost entirely done robotically, we're going to need that capability for the vehicles to go and get the job done and create what we need for whatever mission we're trying to accomplish.
And so Dynetics also tapped Astrobotic for commercial payload service on board their human landing system, you know, taking people back to the moon. Big deal. We're all excited about it. The first woman, the next man on the moon. So what is that piece of it that Astrobotic is bringing to the table for the future of humans on the moon?
Yeah, a very, very exciting mission by NASA, and we're really excited to be partnered with Dynetics on this. We are offering our commercial services on board the Dynetics human lander. So the idea is the same thing, the same shipping model that we use on our landers like Peregrine will then be applied to the human lander. So other payloads can go to the surface of the moon, can use the power and communications of that large lander, and potentially have ways to advance or enhance the capability of the astronauts down on the surface. So we're really like the business arm that's operating and doing the integrations of those payloads for that mission.
And so you mentioned in Space News op-ed from a couple of years ago that it's been, you know, since 1972 since we've really had anything on the moon. And, you know, it's shocking to a whole lot of people because we've traveled out to the rest of the solar system. We've done all these things. We've had so many missions to Mars, but there still is so much to learn about the moon. So what's so exciting to you about finally getting back there and the different opportunities that are finally going to open up this time to hopefully, if we do what we say we're going to do and we stay on the moon and we continue on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the really exciting things about the moon is that it's our nearest neighbor. And the reason that's so important is that if we're going to learn to live off the land of any other planetary body, it's going to happen on the moon first. If we're going to learn to live in space on another planetary body, it's going to happen on the moon first. We need to go there, and that's our practice ground. Before we go millions and millions of miles away from Earth, we have to learn to walk before we run. And that's where we're going to do that. So that's everything from learning to have astronauts operate in a lunar gravity or microgravity. That's like extracting the resources, like I was mentioning. That's going to be a huge stepping stone for the future. And then also just exploring another planetary body. I mean, there's for example, there's caves underneath the surface of the moon. And if we can get inside those caves, that could be natural protection from the elements. So maybe they're interesting places to settle. Or maybe there's interesting things to find on caves in the moon, or maybe on Mars. Maybe that's where life is hanging out, because life can hang out here on Earth in just some of the most extreme environments. But we need to start first on the moon. How do you get in and around these things? They look like craters. You have to hop in, get down to the bottom, and explore. There's a whole architecture that needs to be built up around how to do this and how to get inside the craters or inside the caves. But it could be huge because it's natural protection from the elements. And on the moon, it's protection from radiation. It's protection from the micrometeorites that come in. It's also protection from the thermal extremes. It can be above boiling down to liquid nitrogen temperature just in a single day on the moon. But if you're underground, it's protected from all that. So I think that humans are going to settle in caves on the moon and Mars and other destinations for the same reason that humans settled in caves here on Earth. It just provides that natural protection that's necessary whenever we're in a harsh environment. So, coming back to the core of the question, those are the kinds of things that make me really, really excited about going back to the moon, and how I see this as a really, really big step forward for our exploration and development of the solar system. And ultimately, I think it will be our way to get humanity to learn to live off-world. And how we're going to learn to extract resources and use resources in space to further our exploration and development.
And so another project that I know that you all were working on was with Atlas and doing the first ever laser communications terminal there. So that's another first. It's consistently everything it seems like you all are doing is the first thing. So what does that project mean for those that may not know too much about it?
Yeah, so one of our customers, Atlas Space Operations, is interested in flying a laser communication node on our lander. And the reason that's a really big deal is that's like a massive upgrade to our bandwidth capability for communication. So we go from the equivalent of a 56K modem of capability in terms of bandwidth, up to hundreds of megabits per second potentially. So that's like faster than most home internet connections. So that means streaming live. That means 4K kind of video coming back from the surface of the moon, and that's really important for feedback about what's going on the surface. It's also going to be really important for operating robot fleets that can go and extract these resources, because you're going to need that real-time feedback for operators here on the ground. So laser communication, if we can make, if our customers can make that work from the surface of the moon, will be another big breakthrough for making space more accessible.
And so another thing, and you mentioned this just a little bit earlier, was that you do have that NASA contract that is going to get the commercial payload service for the NASA's human landing system. So, what does it mean when we hear a new commercial payload service? That's a little bit different than just we're sending it for astronauts. What all does that entail?
Yeah, so I think the big deal on that is that commercial means that if you have the money, anybody can access it. It's not restricted to a single government or a single people. So our first mission has, I think, 5 other nations on board it already. And I think that's really important and a really big thing for making space accessible, is so that everybody can access it. So that's what I think about first and commercially. And then the second thing is I think it's about building a sustainable architecture that's affordable. So if you build something once or twice and you're trying to push the edge of technology, you're probably going to have a pretty expensive bill on the end of that. But if you're in the commercial world, you're going to build things many, many, many times over. You're going to hone it, optimize it, and that's how we can get our costs down. And that's a key thing, because commercial business becomes a stepping stone, a building block that you can do bigger and bigger and bigger things on. So an example is the launch industry. I mean, we are buying commercial launch from the launch industry, and our capability, our pricing is possible because of that. So I think it's just another step in that road of foundation blocks that can push the space agencies to do even grander and more exotic things in space that push us further and further outwards, and increase the value of the return for what we can use space for.
So I'm a huge Mars fan. I'm involved with a couple different Mars organizations. So I got to ask if you guys have any eyes on Mars and what would be exciting for you in particular. I mean, even what you might already have working, and then something that you would love to see, Astrobotic be involved in.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we're a space robotics company, so we are focused on the moon right now, but we are also keeping an eye on Mars. Some of the things that I'm most interested in is there's the same caves that I mentioned that are on the moon can also occur on Mars. So if we can learn to get in and around these on the moon, we could potentially do the same thing on Mars. And maybe that's where life is. Maybe that's the good place to settle on Mars. So that could be incredibly interesting. So that's probably some kind of flyer that goes in. On the moon, you'd have to do it propulsively, but on Mars, you could maybe have a simplified rotorcraft potentially that could get down inside. There's technology in development on exactly that. So that's one big part, and the other is using our robots and landers potentially on Mars in the future. But I think we still have a lot to do on the moon in order to open up and make it more affordable and regular routine access for Mars. And ultimately, we need to do that by creating the technology, creating the capability on the moon first.
Excellent. And it looks like we have a question here from Manish, and he wants to know what kind of research will be done from the Viper mission. How will we benefit from that here on Earth?
Yeah, the Viper mission in particular is really exciting. So thanks for asking that question. So the Viper mission is a large vehicle that's going to be sent to the pole of the moon. It's a 475 kilogram rover. It's going to go to the poles of the moon and drill for water at the poles in the permanently shadowed areas. And that's a really, really big deal, because if we can find water under the poles, we can learn to extract that water. So one of the first things we have to do is say, is it in chunks? Is it in little bits? Is it attached to other materials? How much is actually there? We have data from orbiters that have established the very high probability of water, but no one has actually gone to the poles and touched it or extracted any amount of it. So this would be the very first time that a rover would go and do that. So if we can extract that resource, if we can know what quantity, what form it's in under the soil, that is the first big step to potentially using that water. So if you know what that process is, then you can return with something that actually can extract a usable quantity of that water to turn into rocket fuel. And then potentially you can refuel your lander using lunar fuel and go back up to orbit and potentially do sample return or any number of things. So that's where you could get to the real reusability of landers. Is imagine a lander taxi system that goes from the moons back to orbit and rendezvous with astronauts or whatever else, and you can be carrying materials, you can be carrying supplies for an astronaut base, you could potentially just be carrying the fuel up to refuel spacecraft to go deeper and deeper in space. Maybe there's materials there for 3D printing, for example, and you need a replacement part and bring up some raw materials from the moon. Any number of things could be enabled by that, but it would be the first time that resources from another planetary body could be used for space exploration. And that is, I think, one of the next big steps for opening up our solar system.
And man, I gotta roll with it from there. You talk about opening up the solar system. Is there anywhere in particular that excites you that you would love to see something from Astrobotic land on someday? Europa, Titan, anything like that? Titan, by the way, Titan.
Well, those are some good ones. You mentioned Mars. I'm excited about Mars, but Europa and Titan in particular. I mean, water, ocean, right? Under the ice. Like how cool could that be for some of the outer moons out there? So I think any one of those could be enabled by the technology that goes to the moon. So for example, if you can extract that water and you can make water, then you have that technology. You can take that same thing to an icy moon and know that you can produce water fuel to get back or water fuel to go to another of the destinations. So it's really kind of a stepping stone kind of an approach. So what I would love to see is technology that we've created, demonstrated, and developed on the surface of the moon being used in other places in the solar system, because that means that we really are pushing the bounds and pushing the capability of using the resources deeper in space.
I see some people here that are throwing in what they want. Abigail says Enceladus. So I think there's a couple people on my personal page too. They're like, okay, what about Europa? And so we have a great question from, you know what, I've never asked Daniel how he says his last name, and now I feel kind of embarrassed by it. But he wants to know, which is your favorite lander, Peregrine or the Griffin? And by the way, I'm sure you already know this, but he works for you, so he's going to think this is funny.
Well, I got to say, I'm a little, well, I don't know if I can say that. It's kind of like picking favorite children, so I might get in trouble for it. So I hope not many people are listening, but I'm a little partial to Griffin myself, because that's the vehicle that precluded Peregrine. It's the vehicle that I worked most on in the early days, and it's also the one that I came up with the name for. So I'm a little attached to that one. Obviously, with all of our great team now, it's matured and grown up and done really well as a platform, and it's significantly different than what I worked on, but still exciting to see it, in the general form of what we started with so many years ago.
And looks like you will have a mission that you're doing with the Mexican Space Agency, I think. Anna Cristina Alvera wants to know about that. So is that correct? Hopefully she got that one right. I would feel bad if we got like two of them in one conversation. So
that one's spot on. So we
no surprise there.
We do have a mission with the Mexican Space Agency, which is a really perfect example of our customers. So we are all about making space accessible to the world. We went to many years ago, actually. They were one of the early customers. We went to a space space show. Lots of people were there. We got to meet with Dr. Mendieta, who is the head of the space agency, and he said, right in our first meeting, consider us a partner, and he came through in spades on that. So now the Mexican Space Agency could be the fourth nation to land and operate a payload on the surface of the moon after China. And it's just a perfect snapshot of why we do what we do. It's a huge opportunity for them as a nation, and it's inspiring for us and humbling for us to be a part of their nation's great accomplishment there. So they actually partnered with a university in Mexico City, I believe, to develop that payload that will be attached to the lander and fly up and land on the surface of the moon.
I mean, there's so much that you all have going on, and to accomplish so much so quickly, it's been really impressive to watch. So, for those people that are out there that are inspired by what the company does, what you have done, do you have any words of advice for people that want to follow in your footsteps and try and see if they can do some of the incredible things that you and Astrobotic and the people that you I'm sure are happy to work with are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've popped up a lot in the news of late, but we are certainly by no means an overnight success. We're founded in 2007, so it's taken us 13 years to get us here. We've been through lots and lots of iterations of the company. We've had lots of people helping us along the way, but the real keys are finding great partners to work with right from the get-go. You've got to have a strong team. And without a team, you've got nothing. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You really need that strong team. I'm thrilled that we have that today. But that's really the cornerstone to building the company from the get-go. And then over time, you have to have the passion, the endurance to get through the tough days, because you're going to get punched in the face several times along the way, and it's going to suck, and you're going to think, oh, maybe I should quit. But luckily we didn't, but we very well could have, and we were close many times. But it's really about having that passion to get you through those dark days that can get you through to the other side. And then for us, we went out and went after a market that wasn't created. We had to go convince the world that it should exist. And that's a doubly hard problem. So if you're looking for something that doesn't take 13 years, but maybe just a few years, I'd suggest going after an existing market. But if you really are a dreamer and long-term willing to gun it out, then you can actually go create new markets, and dreams really can come true that way. And it really does feel that way after 13 years of trial and tribulation.
And these are always fun questions to kind of end the interview on. Manage wants to know, if you could go to any planet, which one would you go to? You, not Astrobotic. Are you down? You want to go to Mars?
I would go to Mars, but I would still go to the moon first. It's probably because I've spent so much time thinking about it. But the moon gravity in particular would be really fun to play with, like 1/6 of Earth gravity. So if you weigh 120 pounds here on Earth, it feels like you're 20 pounds on the moon. So that means you can jump really high. That means you could do all kinds of things that you can't do here on Earth. Some people say, for example, theorize that if you had a big dome full of air on the moon, you could potentially have wings and fly, and just flap your arms and fly. Like that would be amazing. Real life Icarus. So I'm partial to the moon, probably because I spent so much time, but I also think it would be a really, really fun place to just play and live.
The real life Icarus part kind of scared me a little bit, won't lie. Like once you got too close to the sun, right? So just one last question. Where can people find you on social media, Astrobotic as well? And they can follow along with all you all are up to. You guys tweet pretty regularly. There's always something new going on. So where can people find you guys?
Yeah, check out our website, astrobotic.com, and there's a login there. You can sign up to get our press releases, so we'll update you on that. We don't inundate. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram.
Excellent, John. It was so good to have you on the show today, and hopefully get to see you at Symposium in the near future.
Looking forward to it. Thanks much for having me on today. Appreciate it.
We were excited to have you. And everyone, that's going to conclude the last episode of the live edition of Space Foundation Space4U podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and of course, our website, www.spacefoundation.org, where you can also learn about the various ways you can support the Space Foundation. And don't forget to visit www.discoverspace.org for more digital content for teachers, parents, and students. And you can support the Space Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, by visiting www.spacefoundation.org/donate. And all these outlets and more, it's our goal to inspire, educate, connect, and advocate for the space community, because at the Space Foundation, we will always have space for you. Thank you so much for watching, and do make sure to check in on Friday for our new episode of Space4U, the official podcast, with Danielle Dallas Russa. She is the granddaughter of an Apollo astronaut. It's going to be really amazing, and she does amazing things with her Back to Space program. So we will see you all then. Thank you so much.